Breaking news shook Britain this morning. The BBC has aired a full-length investigative documentary produced and narrated by Princess Anne herself, a programme that insiders are already calling the most devastating royal exposé of the decade. Within hours of its broadcast, hashtags like #BBC Anne Film and #Meghan Unmasked were trending worldwide. The subject? Meghan Markle, and what Anne calls the truth the palace could no longer ignore. For months, rumours have swirled around a secret BBC project. Few believed it would ever see the light of day. But tonight, it has, and its shockwaves are already reaching Hollywood, California, where Meghan and Prince Harry are said to be in a state of complete disbelief. According to one close friend, Meghan thought she was the one telling the story. She never expected Anne to beat her to it. The documentary opens not with glamour, but with cold, calculated calm. Princess Anne's voice, precise and unwavering, declares, "Silence has its limits. The truth must eventually speak." What follows, according to veteran royal correspondents, is nothing short of explosive, a 40-minute dossier of testimonies, unseen footage, and palace witnesses. Within minutes of the broadcast, Meghan's name began trending alongside the word fraud. Netflix reportedly suspended her upcoming series. A senior executive confirmed off record that the optics were unsalvageable. Insiders claim the decision came just 20 minutes after the BBC programme began airing. Observers have noted how deliberate Anne's timing was. A palace source told the Daily Mail, "Anne has watched everything unfold in silence. She knew Meghan's media game better than anyone, and she knew that the perfect counterattack was patience." For 3 long years, Anne remained quiet, even as tabloids accused her of jealousy or coldness. Now, her silence appears to have been strategic. What's remarkable is the tone. There are no dramatic sound effects, no flashy edits, only Anne's composed narration, intercut with interviews from long-serving staff members. The result is unnervingly real. According to royal commentator Harriet Lang, it feels like a legal deposition disguised as a documentary. Every word lands like evidence, not gossip. In California, the fallout was immediate. Sources say Meghan was in the middle of a Zoom meeting when her phone started vibrating non-stop. Her PR manager reportedly shouted, "Turn on BBC One now." By the time she did, Anne's face was already on screen. With the headline, "The Truth About Meghan Markle," Anne begins by stating that she is not seeking revenge, but responsibility. "I have no interest in spectacle," she says. But falsehood repeated too many times becomes accepted as truth. Her words are crisp, almost surgical. The documentary then teases what it calls the real origin of the fracture between Anne and Meghan. It's a bombshell that rewrites the public narrative. The palace has always portrayed the rift as cultural, the collision between a modern duchess and an old institution. But Anne's documentary claims something very different, a criminal act witnessed and documented within the palace walls. According to BBC producers, the evidence Anne presents will redefine the world's understanding of Meghan Markle. Veteran editor James Collings, who worked on the film, described it as a quiet detonation, the kind that leaves no debris, only silence. Social media, however, was anything but silent. Comment sections flooded with disbelief and anger. "Is this the end of Meghan's empire?" one user wrote. Another said simply, "Anne waited, and she struck." And public sentiment appears to be shifting rapidly. Polling data overnight showed a 20-point drop in Meghan's favourability rating in the UK, and a noticeable dip even in the United States. Analysts now predict a media crisis spiral, with brands and sponsors reassessing their partnerships in real time. What exactly is in Anne's film? What evidence could possibly justify this kind of global fallout? According to early leaks from BBC insiders, the documentary reveals a sequence of events that began not with words, but with a forbidden act, one that took place in a locked corridor deep within the palace. The next revelation, insiders warn, will shatter whatever remains of Meghan's public image. And as one senior royal aide told reporters tonight, what Anne has shown is only the beginning. The real story starts inside Diana's room. The palace corridors were never meant to tell stories, but on this night, they did. According to the Truth About Meghan Markle, the turning point came not in a boardroom or a press conference, but in the most sacred wing of Buckingham Palace, the private archive of the late Princess Diana. It was there, Anne reveals, that the entire saga began. The documentary transitions from Anne's calm narration to a grainy security recording. The timestamp: a late autumn evening in the first year of Meghan's marriage. A dim hallway. A figure moving quietly under the flickering light. The camera zooms in. The Duchess of Sussex, alone, glancing over her shoulder. Viewers barely have time to process the scene before Anne's voice cuts through the silence. That night changed everything. A new voice joins the film, elderly, brittle, but steady. His name, Thomas Reid, a former palace attendant who served under 3 generations of royals. For the first time, he speaks publicly. "I was doing my usual rounds," he says, eyes fixed on the camera. "That corridor leads to Her late Royal Highness's private archive. No one goes in there, not without authorization." He pauses, swallowing hard. "But I saw the door was slightly ajar. The lock had marks on it, like it had been tampered with. Inside, I saw her, on her knees facing the safe. The audience watches, spellbound. Meghan, in the footage, appears to be fumbling with something small and metallic. The camera zooms closer, a straightened paperclip glinting under the light. Anne's narration resumes, quiet but cold. "The box she was trying to open belonged to my late sister-in-law, Diana. It contained her personal diaries, letters never meant for public eyes." In the documentary, Anne recounts how she had been alerted by Thomas that something was wrong. "I remember running down that corridor," she says. "I didn't believe what I was hearing. But when I reached the room, the door was open, and there she was." The reenactment plays. Anne bursts into the room, calling out sharply, "What in heaven's name are you doing?" Meghan freezes. The paperclip clatters to the floor. Her face changes, first shock, then tears. Thomas's voice trembles slightly as he continues. "She pointed at me, said I was the one breaking in, that she tried to stop me. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I've worked for this family for over 40 years. Anne appears again on screen, her tone emotionless. "I saw her with my own eyes. She was holding the clip. She was opening the box. And yet, she accused the man behind me of the same crime." Royal experts featured in the program described the event as one of the most serious breaches of trust in modern royal history. Palace archivist Eleanor Banks calls it a symbolic violation, not just of a private room, but of Diana's legacy itself. Insiders interviewed by BBC producers add that the footage had been kept confidential for years under palace protocol and was only released now with Anne's explicit approval. One senior aide told reporters, "Anne waited until the right moment. She didn't want vengeance. She wanted the truth to be undeniable." For Meghan's supporters, the broadcast was a gut punch. In Los Angeles, her legal team reportedly went into emergency meetings within minutes of the film's release. "If that footage is genuine," said one American entertainment lawyer, "her credibility is in freefall." Online, debate exploded. Some fans insisted the video might be misinterpreted or edited, but others began to question what many had avoided saying aloud. What if the palace had been silent because it was protecting evidence? Anne's measured commentary adds a layer of quiet fury. She said the paperclip wasn't hers, the princess narrates. "That I had misunderstood what I saw, but truth does not bend to convenience." According to BBC journalists, the release of this particular scene was heavily debated during production. Some believed it was too inflammatory. Others insisted it was central to understanding Anne's motivation. In the end, the footage aired, uncut. As the documentary ends its second act, Anne summarizes the night with words that feel almost judicial. It wasn't about property, it was about principle. She crossed a line that no royal ever should. Experts note how carefully the film avoids overt emotion. Anne doesn't scream or accuse, says royal historian Michael Hensley. She simply presents and lets the evidence speak. That's what makes it devastating. But the BBC broadcast doesn't stop there. In the final seconds of this segment, a new teaser appears on screen, a flash of another recording, the faint red blink of a phone's camera light reflecting off a silver teaspoon. A female voice, unmistakably Anne's, concludes the sequence. It was not the last time she would betray that trust. The next moment she recorded was far worse. Viewers barely breathe as the screen fades to black, and the BBC announcer promises, "Next, the secret recording that changed everything." The third segment of Anne's documentary begins without music, only the clinking of china and the low murmur of polite conversation. The caption reads, "Balmoral Castle, afternoon tea, 2019. The scene is deceptively serene, golden light filtering through the old windows, the late Queen seated by the fireplace, Anne and Meghan facing each other across a small table laid with silver and porcelain. But beneath the calm, as Anne's narration warns, something was recording. Anne's voiceover, crisp and measured, fills the silence. Betrayal often arrives in the guise of courtesy. The documentary replays the moment in slow motion. Meghan sets her phone face down beside her teacup, screen dimmed but still glowing faintly. The camera lingers on a flicker, a red pinpoint reflection dancing on the polished spoon. Anne explains how, in that instant, she realized something was terribly wrong. "I have seen that reflection before," Anne narrates. "It was the telltale sign of a recording light." To confirm her suspicion, Anne tells viewers she deliberately tipped her own teacup. The footage shows the moment. Tea spills toward Meghan's phone, splashing across the lace cloth. Meghan reacts swiftly, snatching it away. The screen flashes bright red before she flips it over. Anne's voice remained calm, almost detached. There was no embarrassment, no apology, just a quiet, practiced smile. According to royal staff present that afternoon, the atmosphere shifted instantly. The Queen, unaware of what had just occurred, continued her gentle conversation. But Anne's eyes, witnesses recall, turned to steel. In an interview, one former footman tells the BBC, "She didn't make a scene, she just stared. That look, everyone in the palace knows it. It's the look that means, I will remember this." After tea, Anne confronted Meghan privately in one of Balmoral's corridors. The film recreates the exchange, using Anne's own recorded account. "I told her," Anne says, "that we value privacy above all, that recording or filming the Queen without permission is not merely impolite, it is an act of betrayal." Meghan, according to Anne, immediately switched tone. Her voice trembled. She claimed she had only wanted to preserve the Queen's wisdom, but Anne saw through it. "I have spent my life reading people," she tells the camera. It was the performance of a seasoned actress, not the remorse of an honest woman. The documentary then reveals something no one outside palace walls had heard before. The conversation Meghan allegedly had just minutes later. A secret recording, recovered from palace surveillance, plays softly over blurred visuals. Meghan's voice, excited and breathless, says, "I got it, the Queen's words. You know what to do. Edit, splice, make it sound like she's admitting what we talked about." The BBC editor pauses the playback midway through. The words hang in the air. Royal expert Simon Alcott comments, "If that's authentic, it's catastrophic. It means Meghan intended to manipulate the Queen's words for her own narrative." In California, damage control was immediate. Meghan's representatives claimed the audio was selectively edited. Yet, within hours, audio analysts hired by the network confirmed its authenticity. "No digital tampering detected," one report stated flatly. Anne continues in the film. At that moment, I understood her method. It was not chaos, it was choreography. Every tear, every pause, every word was designed to control the story. The footage returns to the Balmoral hallway, Anne walking away, her heels echoing on the stone floor. She doesn't look back. I did not raise my voice, she narrates. But I warned her. Once. Journalists later describe that moment as the beginning of the silent war between the two women, a cold, wordless tension that would soon spill into global headlines. The BBC anchors cut briefly to commentary segments. One senior palace correspondent says, "This was Anne's quiet declaration of war, not through tabloids, not through interviews, but through documentation." Even viewers sympathetic to Meghan were left uneasy. Comment threads that once defended her began filling with uncertainty. "I wanted to believe her," one viewer wrote on X. "But if she really recorded the Queen, that's too far." Analysts from The Guardian and Daily Mail alike described this as a reputational earthquake. The juxtaposition of Anne's composure and Meghan's alleged scheming hit the public like a moral hammer. Toward the end of this chapter, the documentary returns to Anne's face, pale, resolute, the camera close enough to catch the tightening of her jaw. "There are lines in this family that must never be crossed," she says. She crossed them twice. Then comes the final tease, a black screen. White letters fade in slowly. She thought the recording would make her powerful. She didn't realize it would become evidence. Anne's closing line delivers the chill. She believed she could control the narrative. She forgot. The truth was recording her too. The program cuts to a brief silence before the next title fades in across the screen. The War of Words, How Meghan Turned the Palace into a Battleground. Sussex side I dramada nói. The documentary shifts tone, from revelation to confrontation. The screen fades from black to a montage of headlines flashing across the world. Meghan breaks her silence. Toxic palace culture. Anne accused of bullying Duchess. The war has gone public. Anne's voice fades into the background as the narrator summarizes the shift. What began as whispers inside Buckingham Palace, the voice says, had exploded into a global communications war. Meghan had struck first. Armed with her own film deals, podcast scripts, and a PR team that insiders called the Californian Cavalry, she released a wave of interviews and online posts painting the palace as a hostile, archaic institution. Her messaging was sharp. She was not a runaway duchess, she was a survivor. Clips play of Meghan's televised interviews. Her voice trembles perfectly on cue. "I was silenced," she says to one American host. "I wasn't protected. Each line lands like a dagger. Cameras flash. Hashtags multiply." For the first time, Anne's name is openly mentioned. In one leaked audio, Meghan describes her as the coldest face of the old guard. Another clip shows her claiming that Anne made palace life unbearable. Inside the walls of Buckingham Palace, the effect was immediate. The staff were flooded with press calls, the royal press office overwhelmed. A former secretary tells the BBC cameras, "It was chaos. Every hour, another accusation." Anne said nothing, not one word. And yet, according to insiders, silence was Anne's weapon. She was documenting everything, says royal journalist Victoria Wren. While Meghan flooded the media, Anne built a case. She kept records, testimonies, CCTV files. She wasn't fighting in headlines, she was building history. The documentary cuts to archival footage from those months. Anne at official engagements, stoic and unflinching, while reporters shouted questions about Meghan. The princess never looked away, never responded. That restraint, so typically Anne, became, in retrospect, the calm before her counterstrike. Experts interviewed by the BBC frame this period as the War of Narratives. Professor Lydia Harker of Oxford's Department of Media Studies explains, "It wasn't about truth anymore. It was about who told the better story." Meghan understood emotion. Anne understood evidence. The film plays snippets of Meghan's growing empire, Netflix teasers, Spotify trailers, the glossy defiant taglines, her truth, her voice, her story, but in the same breath, the BBC anchors cut to the other side of the ocean. Anne in a navy coat, walking through the gates of St. James's Palace, holding a thick folder. That, the narrator says, was the day she delivered her evidence to the BBC. According to a former producer, Anne arrived unannounced. She told us, "I have something the world needs to see." Within the envelope, documents, security logs, and audio clips. It wasn't about revenge, the producer recalls. It was about setting the record straight. Meanwhile, in Los Angeles, Meghan's PR team went into overdrive. They scheduled appearances, crafted victim-centered posts, and leaked stories about Anne's supposed hostility. For weeks, it worked. Sympathy for Meghan surged. Online polls swung in her favor. Until one morning, the BBC teaser appeared. A quiet 30-second clip of Anne's voice saying, "She claims I made her life unbearable. The cameras will show you who was truly persecuted." The clip spread like wildfire. The New York Times called it an iceberg warning. The Guardian headline read, "Anne breaks her silence with evidence." Insiders told the BBC that Meghan's reaction was immediate and furious. She reportedly phoned her lawyer shouting, "She wouldn't dare." The lawyer's response, later leaked to the press, "She already has." The documentary's tone turns analytical again. Commentators dissect the shift from Meghan's emotional storytelling to Anne's cold precision. This is the difference between performance and proof, says royal analyst Clive Denton. Meghan cried on camera. Anne simply showed the tapes. Archival footage plays of Meghan's Netflix trailer being abruptly pulled offline. Insiders confirm the platform had paused production pending verification of allegations. Sponsorship deals faltered. The narrative Meghan built began to fracture under scrutiny. Anne, meanwhile, remained silent publicly, but privately, she had already recorded the narration for her BBC documentary. The script, producers confirm, had been written in her own hand. She refused ghostwriters, one editor said. Every line came from her. The camera lingers on Anne's face from a recent interview clip, her voice steady. "If words can wound, evidence can heal. The truth is not cruel, it is corrective." By the end of this segment, the world understood the stakes. Meghan had turned the palace into a battleground of perception. Anne had turned that battleground into a courtroom. The final seconds replay a sequence of on-screen texts. Two narratives, one truth. The evidence is about to speak. The narrator's closing line is quiet, chilling. Anne waited through 3 years of noise. Tonight, she answers, not with accusation, but with proof. The screen fades, replaced by a final teaser. Next, the revelation, the night the world saw the unedited truth. The screen flashes white, then fades into the BBC studio's stark black backdrop. No dramatic intro this time, only Anne's voice, calm and deliberate. "I have no desire to destroy anyone, but truth must outlive deceit." This is the revelation, the moment the public has been waiting for. The documentary now turns forensic, each scene unfolding like a courtroom case. The first piece of evidence, CCTV footage. The video, time-stamped and unedited, shows the very moment Thomas Reid described. Meghan entering the restricted corridor. The lock to Diana's private archive already scratched, her hand reaching for the teal leather box. The audience gasps softly as she produces the paperclip, the same tiny object that has now become the symbol of betrayal. Anne's narration cuts in. "I watched this tape more than once. Not to accuse, but to be certain." Oh. Thomas reappears on screen, eyes rimmed with fatigue. "When I saw the footage," he says, "I felt relief. People thought I lied, but the truth was right there all along." The second exhibit is an audio clip. Meghan's voice, trembling with carefully placed emotion, speaks to an unknown media contact. They make me feel unsafe. They whisper behind my back. I can't breathe in that place. Then, without transition, a second clip follows. The same voice, colder, controlled. Take the Queen's words, re-edit them. Make it sound like she's acknowledging the hostility. It'll strengthen the narrative. The contrast is devastating. The studio remains silent for a long 5 seconds before Anne speaks again. This is what manipulation sounds like: sympathy in public, strategy in private. The program cuts to interviews with 2 former palace assistants, both previously silent. One, her voice disguised, says, "She'd come to us separately. Tell me that my colleague had spoken ill of me, then tell her the same thing about me." It created distrust everywhere. The other adds, "Later, those same stories appeared in tabloids as proof that the palace was toxic." A royal correspondent notes dryly, "It wasn't a toxic workplace, it was a toxic script, and Meghan was writing it." Anne's composure never cracks. "I wish I could say I was surprised," she says in the film, but deceit often travels with charm. The BBC anchors provide context. Palace communications confirm that Meghan's allegations of workplace cruelty, mental distress, and racial bias had triggered 3 internal investigations, none of which found substantive evidence. That's why Anne decided to act, one senior aide reveals. Not to retaliate, but to close the case. On social media, the impact is immediate. Hashtags flip overnight. Number Justice for Thomas, number Anne the Truth Teller, number Paperclipgate. The world begins dissecting every frame. Influencers who once praised Meghan delete posts. Commentators call it the greatest PR implosion since Wallis Simpson. Netflix issues a short, brutal statement. Following the broadcast of verifiable evidence contradicting previous claims, all collaborative projects with the Duchess of Sussex are terminated with immediate effect. In Los Angeles, paparazzi swarm outside Meghan's mansion. Insiders tell tabloids she is devastated, isolated, and furious. Friends describe her as betrayed by the very media she once commanded. Back on BBC, Anne ends her documentary not with anger, but with something colder: disappointment. "I do not celebrate this," she says, "but lies rot silently. Eventually, they smell." Her final exhibit plays quietly. A short clip of Meghan smiling in an old interview, saying she wants to live authentically, without masks. The image freezes, then dissolves into static. Anne's voice returns one last time. Authenticity begins with honesty, not performance. The camera cuts to black. The BBC announcer speaks softly over the silence. What began as rumour has ended in record. What was denied has now been documented. Around the world, analysts agree this was not just a documentary, it was an indictment. And yet, even as the credits roll, one line appears beneath the closing logo. Unreleased footage remains under review. The voiceover ends with an echoing statement from an anonymous BBC producer. What the world saw tonight was enough to end her career. But what's still unseen may change history. The morning after the broadcast, London awoke to silence, the strange, heavy kind that follows an explosion. Overnight, the monarchy's most elusive figure had done what tabloids, lawyers, and journalists had failed to do for years. She ended the Meghan narrative. Outside Buckingham Palace, crowds gathered, cameras rolling. Reporters shouted questions into the chill November air. Has the palace responded? Will Meghan issue a statement? But no answer came. The Queen's portrait still hung untouched above the gates, watching over a kingdom that had, at last, stopped arguing. In California, the scene was very different. Paparazzi swarmed the gates of Montecito as headlines rolled across screens. Meghan's empire collapses. Anne's verdict changes everything. Industry sources confirmed what many had already suspected. Sponsors gone. Deals cancelled. Public sympathy evaporated. And yet, through it all, Anne remained unseen. No victory speech, no interviews. Only a brief statement from the BBC. The documentary speaks for itself. Royal analysts filled the vacuum with their own interpretations. Anne has redefined what royal duty means, said historian Simon Alcott. She didn't fight fire with fire, she froze it. Others praised her restraint. She didn't humiliate Meghan, she let the evidence do that. The programme's aftermath reshaped more than reputations. Public opinion, once sharply divided, began to converge. Polls showed that a majority now viewed Anne as the monarchy's moral anchor, the steel within the silk. The phrase trended for days. Then, days later, a single image appeared online. Anne leaving Windsor Castle, wearing her signature dark coat, carrying a plain brown folder. No statement accompanied the photo, only speculation. Some whispered that the folder contained Part 2. A palace source, speaking anonymously to the Times, offered only one cryptic remark. Anne does not seek revenge. She seeks closure. And she isn't finished. The BBC documentary, now viewed more than 60 million times across platforms, has been hailed as the most consequential royal exposé in modern history. But for Anne, it was never about spectacle, it was about preservation. As she said in her closing remarks, replayed endlessly across international news networks, history has enough heroes and villains. What it needs are witnesses. And in that one sentence, she turned silence into power. By the week's end, the chaos had subsided. The palace gates closed once more, the crowds dispersed, and the British press, for once, ran out of words. But online, the conversation continued. Every clip, every frame, every moment from The Truth About Meghan Markle was replayed, dissected, and debated. Some still questioned Anne's motives. Others called her the avenger of Diana's legacy. Either way, the verdict was clear. In the end, Meghan's empire had been built on stories. Anne dismantled it with truth. And as the credits of the BBC's final rebroadcast faded, a simple caption appeared one last time. White on black, understated, definitive. The record stands. Thank you for watching this special report. If you believe the truth deserves to be heard, subscribe, stay tuned, and join us as we uncover what comes next inside the House of Windsor. Because, as history has shown us, this is far from over.